guys, Alex Peak Performance Reviews. Welcome to another vlog and basically another PPR Tech Garage. Obviously we've done the one recently about turbochargers, and obviously I just wanted to carry on that with a different product, and today we're basically going to be talking about oils. So I'm going to try and give you the 101 and the basics and even slightly more advanced kind of fundamentals of engine oils essentially. Just a quick little thing I'm going to say before I carry on as well. I want to kind of give people my tech background just so they know that I'm kind of not spitballing and making things up. Within reason, obviously I do forget things and I will get sometimes little bits wrong. I'll try to get everything as best as I can, and sometimes if I do make a little mistake, I do apologise. Now, my tech background in cars is that I used to be an automotive tech dem. So my fundamental knowledge is I have qualifications in automotive engineering, and also I'm very much self-taught also in any advancement of that, I suppose, in some way, shape or form as well. I've got some other qualifications I won't bore you with, but I do have a fundamental, basic or decent knowledge of kind of automotive engineering and parts and products and things like that. I'm not an expert in every field, and I do get the odd thing wrong. I think the other day someone pointed out that I said, I think turbine, basically on the cold side of the turbo, and the turbine is effectively actually the exhaust housing. We make mistakes, but the fundamentals of everything else I think was pretty much spot on. But if anyone wants to correct me on anything, I can always only apologise, because obviously I don't want to give you guys the wrong tech and everything like that. But basically, onwards and upwards, let's kind of carry on. We're going to go on to engine oils, like I said. So the first thing we want to talk about on an engine oil is the number or viscosity, and both these two numbers. So effectively you have a number this side on the left hand side, and you have a number on the right hand side. And obviously I've got a number of different oils in here. I've got two fully synthetic oils. I'll go on to synthetic oils and oils in general, and also I've got a race oil, which is an ester based oil. But like I say, going back onto the weight and the viscosity ratings of these engine oils, on the right hand side you've got a number which refers to the engine's viscosity rating, and each different manufacturer of these oils put different obviously numbers on here, and they're basically dictated by the manufacturer using these and testing these products on what's called a viscometer. The number on the right is the engine oil's thickness at 100 degrees Celsius, and the left hand number cold thickness of the motor oil. And I'll go into a bit more about that. So the test standard for this reading is based on a viscometer, and the oil goes in from the top and it goes through this almost like a canister, which is a viscometer, and the oil pours in from the top, and it takes a certain amount of time to get out the bottom. Now it's controlled in a manner where the oil goes in at 100 degrees Celsius through this viscometer, so it's heated up to 100 degrees Celsius, and then takes a certain amount of time to go through the canister and through the bottom, and that's dictated by how thick the oil is at 100 degrees Celsius, and that is the right hand number. So it's dictated by a certain amount of time and how long it takes to go through the viscometer at 100 degrees Celsius. And then the left hand number is simply its thickness when it's cold, probably in the state it is in the tub essentially, or the tin. That is basically that number down to a T. So that is all you need to know about the viscosity number. If you want to know, obviously they test it obviously at 100 degrees, because typically speaking, anyone who will maybe have an oil temperature gauge on their car, maybe when they're using it for racing, they'll know that typically speaking on an everyday run out in the car, they'll normally run between 90, the engine oil would normally run between 90 degrees and 110 degrees Celsius. Now, like I say, the viscometer would test at 100, which is somewhere in between the middle, which is good. So it's a good test that the manufacturer does. to get the viscosity of the oil. Obviously, anyone who races a car and has an oil temperature gauge, typically speaking, in race conditions or when you're out giving the car some real stick on a track day, it's not been unknown to see engine temperatures of normally between 110 and 120. Up to 120 is normally okay, 110 to 120, and then when you're getting closer to 120 and a little bit above, I remember in my Super when I was first running that, it was getting up to 122, 124, and I've seen other cars that had even higher oil temps to that. When you get to that kind of engine temperature, or oil temperature should I say, that's when you want to think about something like an oil cooler to lower that temperature back down to somewhere between 110 and 120 when you're really giving it some stick. So yeah, that's basically the fundamentals of that. So going back to the viscometer, essentially the slower it goes, the slower the engine oil goes through the viscometer, the higher the number. The quicker it goes through the viscometer, the lower the number. So obviously, hence, this is obviously a thick oil when it heats up to 100 degrees. So it's got a thickness of 40. This one obviously has 30, but its operating temperature at cold is the same as this one. So this one's thicker at 100 degrees temperature. And this is a race oil. And obviously race oils are typically higher viscosity, often at the cold range and also at its hot operational range. The reason why it needs to be thick typically is it will take higher temperatures easier and better than something like this, for example, or a lower numbered viscosity oil. And effectively, the easiest way to comprehend and communicate that is effectively the hotter an oil runs, the thinner it gets. And so obviously this, even though it's a 50 at 100 degrees, it's going to start to lower as the oil heats up to the 110 degrees Celsius range to 120 degrees Celsius range. Now, if I run a 30 viscosity oil in a race situation, it would probably get so thin that the oil would, go on the bearings and things like that, the camshaft, and potentially wear very, very fast. So you may only want to run a 30 oil in race conditions at something like 5 minutes, 10 minutes if you're lucky. But a 50 oil would be able to run for, say, a 24-hour race or something like that. But it's a bit more complex than that, but we'll go on to it a little bit more in a moment. Yeah, so there's a bit of a mixed bag on the internet on this, and I've done more research. Aside from things that I already know, there's a mixed bag of opinions on things, but in general, obviously, the lower number is its cold operational temperature. But you see, obviously, and people say that you need a cold operational temperature, so you want a low number and then a high number. But in certain conditions, actually, in race conditions, you don't really tend to turn an engine on and then go race the car straight away. But if you were to do that, that is when you need a cold, a lower number. So maybe in colder climates and conditions, you'd want a low number that could go to a decent number on the right-hand side. But in an engine where you've got time to sit and let the engine warm up, the worry for some people is that if you have this number on the left-hand side really, really thick, they worry that the oil won't make its way to the bearings and things like that, and you'll get premature engine wear. This seems to be something that's written in a lot of places. It's been kind of dependent on the oil, null and void and nullified by other people. Realistically, as long as you allow your engine to get up to temperature, it should then still make its way to the bearings, to the turbo, etc. People worry that if you run a thick oil that's going to be great for racing, you'll have really premature engine wear the moment you turn it on for 5-10 minutes. That's not the case. If you warm up the engine in the correct way before you start racing, you are going to be okay, and that is going to be much better for endurance racing or high rev range cars that are using high revs all the time in race situations, track days, if you're going out for long periods of time. But again, the number is dictated by what you run on your car, bearing clearances. Check with your engine manufacturer for the specific engine viscosity they recommend you to run. If you've got an older car that's had some engine work and the clearances are different on the bearings, on the motor, you do need to check with them to see what the clearances are. And there are some charts online that basically will give you recommendations on engine viscosity, but your engine builder will typically be able to tell you what engine viscosity grade oil they would want you to run in that car. So definitely check with your race builder and really research before you just go ahead and just go, oh, I think that's what will be better for me because I'm racing or track day. Do your research and just make sure you're getting the right engine oil. By all means, drop me a comment in the comment section and ask me any questions. I can relay it onto people that I know a lot more than even I do on engine oils, and to be fair, I don't pretend to know everything about engine oils. I've just done a lot of research and I know quite a bit anyway. But yeah, feel free to hit us up in the comment section about anything like that. I've already mentioned about engine tolerances. There's also other things that you will need to kind of look at. If you have a motorbike, for example, that runs the engine oil in the clutch as well as the motor, API and ACEA, I think it's standards also. You need to look for those on the oils as well. So again, you need to make sure how the engine oil is used for that specific car. It's a bit like the Mini. It runs, it kind of has a shared motor and gearbox. Basically the oil system is shared on the gearbox and the motor, so very strange. So you need to be really careful about how you choose and check with your manufacturer if it needs an ASI number or an ACEA number on standardisation for that car as well. A lot of the information that I've been saying is typically available on the back of this, and sometimes they have leaflets attached to them and it will give you an API number, an ACIA number. Some cars need very specific oils for a certain reason, but I won't go into that other than what I've already just done. Going on to a more advanced kind of area of engine oils, there is these days different engine oils that have different ZDDP kind of content in them, and it's measured in parts per million. ZDDP stands for, and I'm going to read this out because I can't pronounce this very well and I'm probably not pronouncing it right anyway. Dialkylphosphate. I don't know whether I said it right, but it's shortened and abbreviated to ZDDP, and I understand it as ZDDP. And it's a zinc phosphate content, which is basically an additive, which is it's like an anti-wear property additive that's been added to an oil. Typically speaking, but not always, the higher the ZDDP content in an oil, the better it is, and sometimes a little bit more money the engine oil costs. However, it's not an exact science, and I will go on. Sometimes having too high a ZDDP will then be detrimental to the engine and actually will then cause a little bit too much wear, if that makes sense. So it goes to the point where it has anti-friction properties, and then when there's too much content, it can cause friction. So you need to strike up a careful balance, or you just find a really good oil that you do your research on and you know is really good, you've seen it being recommended by the right people, and you go for that. Don't kind of risk just kind of going for anything just because it's got what you think is right. Always do your research, always look at different oils available, and I'll go on to ones that I use and what I think is good. So yeah, obviously over the years, these are some of the oils I've used. The common oil is a cheaper oil. I've used this probably on a basic run around or something a bit more basic that I've probably had at some time in my life. This is actually full, so typically speaking, I don't really use this oil. Rock oil is a really good kind of British oil that I like. They also have a race oil that I have used before, and it seems to be really good stuff, available in the UK. This oil is pretty much the daddy out there. Motul 300V race oil. It's a beast. I've used it on the Supra. However, I haven't got it here. I have always used a lot of Miller's oil. Miller's run a really high-end, good Easter oil that I'm now using in the Supra. It's a lot more. It's much more better availability than the 300V, even though it's amazing. But it's kind of that level of oil. It's that good, and it's a triple Easter oil again, very high quality, and it's something that I would recommend. And that is obviously a really, really good product as well. If you buy a good engine oil, you can have a good content, a ZDDP content, and also a good engine oil can also increase horsepower. Not by magic, and it's not going to give you added extra horsepower as such, like some kind of magic power adder, but due to the properties and the anti-friction properties, your engine can kind of more free rev more easily as such, and you're going to get a higher horsepower versus a different oil, I guess. So it's almost like 3 horsepower, but you're going to get, like, you know, sometimes a 500 horsepower level car, you could get 5 to 10 horsepower. Which is, you know, nice considering it's just an engine oil you're putting in there. But if you put a more basic oil in, you're going to not have that 5 to 10 horsepower. And typically speaking, it's a bit like lowering the inertia mass on the end of the crankshaft. Obviously, as friction goes up, power will start to go down. So obviously, you need to choose an oil that's correct really for your car. If you use a really thick oil in general, if the car has to fight more to kind of move the oil, it is going to start to lower power. It's the same as the friction within that oil as well. So that is a natural byproduct of kind of running something that's too thick, that's causing too much friction, and that is dictated by, like I say, thickness and also the fundamental basics and properties of that oil. Understanding the worth of a specific oil with a certain ZDDP content or a certain specific content, it is worth looking at a Strybeck curve, and that basically shows you the different kind of 3 stages that engines experience. The valve train basically operates in the boundary phase, and then the piston rings are working in a mixed phase, so between boundary and hydrodynamic. And then the bearings are running in a hydrodynamic state. And basically, essentially what happens is the graph is showing that as friction increases, this effectively means that the extra friction from the excess ZDDP will become a bigger problem as RPM increases. So yeah, too much ZDDP is obviously not good. Obviously, as I said before, really, engine oil is very, very important. Obviously, it's something that you can save money on if you decide to go for a lower end oil, but it's so important to the heart of your engine. Obviously, it's going to be bathing the camshafts, the bearings, pistons, lifters, pumps, turbo, all expensive componentry within the engine. And if you get that wrong, or you have a failure or a premature failure due to engine oil, it's going to potentially be costly, especially if you invest in a lot of money into a modified engine or just anything really. It's just money. So it's worth investing in very good quality engine oil for sure. I'm now going to go, I mentioned earlier on about the different engine oil types. So there's essentially 3 types, if that makes sense, in the sense of we have, or should I say actually 4, we have mineral oil, which is basically an unrefined oil. It's a mineral oil as it says. So it's a very basic unrefined oil which we can use, or you can use in a run-in oil. So where you're trying to kind of cause some friction within the parts. Again, it's a clever science, and you have to get the running oil right. Also, in a more basic engine where there's not lots of other moving parts, older kind of less mechanically advanced old cars, classics, you can use a mineral oil. The positive obviously to using a mineral oil is just that, yeah, obviously because they're unrefined, they're cheaper. So if you can get away with running a mineral oil, you'd run a mineral oil. It's simple as that. Then you go on to the next tier of kind of oils, which is a semi-synthetic oil. Semi-synthetic oils, as you'd expect, are synthesized. They have some processes added to them. So additives are then added to them. In turn, over a mineral, there's fewer impurities, and obviously it's chemically modified. So it's just taken on that little bit to be a little bit better, and that's where that falls. Semi-synthetic obviously uses a mixture of a synthetic oil and a mineral oil, and they're combined, and that's basically the best way to describe it. Going on to a synthetic oil, obviously it's more chemically treated, there's more treatment, more additives, and the cost obviously goes up because the development and the time process of manufacturing that is higher. So it just kind of, again, the quality just increases. And then you come on to the ester oils. An ester oil is basically a even higher grade of oil. It's ester based, and it's a higher higher quality of additive is used. It's the most expensive, but it is the best oil. It has obviously a high performance rating and a low engine wear rating as well. So it costs the most money, but it's the best. It has more treatment go into it. It has more production needed to obviously make it, hence the higher production costs and the higher costs obviously to us. The oil is obviously totally synthesized, and it obviously offers the best lubrication and protection for the engine. Simple as that. That is the basic fundamentals of engine oils, and also going into a little bit more of an advanced kind of fundamentals of engine oils. But that is essentially it. And if you've got any kind of comments for us, any thoughts or any just general questions for us, please do hit us up in the comment section, as we'd love to hear from you. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed our kind of episode 2 of the PPR Tech Garage, and you've learnt a bit. If you haven't, obviously ask us some questions. But definitely talk to us, hit us up in the comment section. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. As always, like, share, comment and subscribe, and we'll see you again in the next one. Bye for now.